to make better sounding tracks. You have to think.
Like a vocoder.
Okay, you might be thinking, what the heck is this guy talking about? But bear with me, because in the next couple of videos, we're going to focus on mixing and getting your music to sound better. And that oftentimes starts with critical listening, understanding frequency ranges, and kind of getting a hang of how sounds work in general. So let's go. You've probably seen some people out there using one of these plastic tubes to create sounds like this.
Tonight, I just want to take you higher.
But that's not a vocoder, that's a Talkbox. And even though they get confused sometimes and can tend to sound somewhat similar in some scenarios, they work very, very differently. In the case of a Talkbox, you actually have a synth sound that's being guided through that tube into your mouth. And then your mouth kind of acts as an effect, filtering the sound, shaping it, adding formants and articulation, but you're not actually using your voice. It's really just the synth sound being shaped by your mouth into something that sounds like a voice.
Let's set this party off right.
In the case of a vocoder, you actually oftentimes are using your voice, but you can also send any other type of signal into a vocoder, which is then being split into different frequency bands, kind of analyzed, and then pressed onto another sound, something like a synth or anything else really, which is then mimicking the sound which is coming into the vocoder. And famous examples for this would be, for example, by Earth, Wind and Fire. Or Harder, Better, Stronger by Daft Punk. And in this case, I kind of understand where some confusion can come from. If you check out this cover by Lawrence Rode, he's actually using a Talkbox instead of a vocoder, and it sounds somewhat similar.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger.
So by now you're probably really wondering, what does all of this have to do with mixing or making your music sound better? And why do I say that in order to sound better, you should think like a vocoder? Well, let's jump into the project that we heard in the preview. So we had some drums, a bass line, kind of a dubby piano sound, some vocals, another chord, and some more elements. So that's kind of how the project is set up. And in order to set up a project like this, you kind of have to make many different decisions, right? Starting with the sample selection and sound selection, where most of the production quality will come from, then mixing things, putting things in their place a bit, maybe altering the sounds a bit, sometimes more, sometimes less drastically, but that's kind of the process. And in order to make good and informed decisions, you obviously have to know what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, what do I actually need. And I feel like that's oftentimes where inexperienced producers kind of lack experience and they don't have an anchor to be like, okay, this is what I need or this is what I don't need. And the solution for that, at least for me, and I think for many other people as well, is critical listening and understanding what material am I working with, what's the quality of the material that I have, and what quality of material do I need. And that's kind of where the analogy for the vocoder comes in for me. Let's say we have a full track like this. I just threw this vocoder on the master. I turn it all the way down so we don't actually hear it, but we see what it's doing. So it's creating these different bands and listening to them. And we can do 20 bands or 10, or we can just do 4. And it kind of analyzes these different bands and looks, okay, what's going on there? And what it then does, it applies what it's learned from its analysis onto a different sound. So if you want to learn what's good or what isn't, you should listen to professional sounding music and carefully analyze the different frequency bands and see, okay, what's present at what point in time, and then apply that to your signal, to your track. And you can go quite wide and say like, okay, we're going to do 4 bands. I'm going to check out what's in the low end and in the maybe low mids, in the high mids and in the highs. Or you can go more detailed and do 20 bands in your mind and be like, okay, I'm carefully listening to different frequency ranges. The things that you learn from your analysis, you should take that into consideration for your sample selection as well as for your mixing moves later on. And you don't have to do this just for a whole track. You should do this for every single element that you have in your productions, because every single sound will have different frequencies present at different points in times. And in order to kind of get an understanding and get you on the right path, I want to start with kick drums, because that's an important element, obviously, of dance music, which is kind of interesting to look at, right? So I picked 4 kick drums that we can check out together, and I show you how I analyze them, how I split them into different bands to understand what's going on in here. And then maybe we can pick one more element to do the same. So we have these 4 kicks down here. 909, which is kind of a subby but also very punchy kick. Then we have kind of an 808 style kick, which is going to be very subby and not have that much mid-range punch. And then you can have anything in between those, right? So we have a kind of a subby kick that also has a shaker on top, and then kind of a punchy but not that 909 type of punchy kind of kick in here with a click in the beginning. So let's compare these and kind of really understand their differences and what makes up their qualities, right? So we're going to start with the 909. So we have a quite subby fundamental note. Then we kind of have a mid-range punch around 200 hertz. And then it kind of drops down. We have a bit of mid-range energy and somewhat leading into the highs, right? Let's compare that with our 808 style kick. Okay, we see we have a lot of focus on the sub. Somewhat of a punch here, but then we're quickly dropping down and we don't have that much of high-end energy. These are just the frequencies which are present in the sound overall. But if you think of it like a vocoder, you really want to understand what frequency is present at what point in time. And in order to do that, let's check out this one, for example. This was kind of an 808 style kick with a shaker on top. If we now open up the Pro-MB, I created 3 different bands. Let's turn this off real quick. And we're also going to look at scope, which kind of shows us the waveform. So this is what the kick looks like now. So it's kind of a long kick, kind of subby. If we listen to just the sub, we can see, all right, this is kind of present throughout. If we bring this even down a bit more, we can see, okay, we're losing some of that attack at the beginning, but that's kind of where we're at. If we listen to the high end, we see, okay, the high end is kind of just present at the beginning. And then later on, like there's something going on, but the high end is present in a very short amount of time. Another way to look at this visually is if we actually look at the waveforms of the kick. So obviously big long waves mean low end, and short breezy movements are high frequencies, like they're literally moving more quickly. So here we see, okay, this shorter waveform will mean some mid-range energy, but then we're very quickly jumping or falling into the low end. Then we have the shaker, which is kind of the length of this, but you can see here's not that much breezy movement anymore, so there's not going to be high end back here. If we compare this to another one, you can see, okay, we have this very clear hit at the beginning and then somewhat quickly jumping into the sub, but here these wavelengths are shorter, so we will have some mid-range and low mid energy in there. If we check out the 909 kick, we have the same. Okay, for quite some time we have some shorter wavelengths, which will mean the punch of the kick will be present for a longer amount of time. And all of this has quite an impact on your EQing, your compression and this type of thing. But looking at a sound like this, it's like, okay, at different points in time, different types of frequencies are present. If you do this by ear and also visually and check out tracks and check out the kicks, for example, in the intro of certain tracks, you will always have a pretty clean kick. You will get an understanding of, okay, what does a good sample sound and look like? One way to make sure that your kicks sound good enough for the club is obviously using the right sample packs. If you like some old school housey kicks and stuff like this, I actually have a pack over in my sample shop. Feel free to check out the link in the description. There's some more stuff over there, so I'd appreciate if you check it out. But let's keep going. If we, for example, now say, okay, we just have Vocoder SPAN and we check out different elements, you should always do this for many elements and be like, okay, in what frequency range are these guys present? Now we have a chord sound. It's kind of starts at 100 hertz, but it's peaking around 200. In a way, it's quite low. So this is already where the kick comes in as well. If we check out the bass, for example, we can see, okay, the bass is quite strong around here, but then it also has all this mid-range energy. That's something to keep in mind. And then you can also decide, okay, how does this change over time? Because a vocoder will actually see that in more detail. If we turn the sensitivity up or do more bands, for example, you can see these fluctuations here. We're starting with more high-end energy, and because this is a filtered synth bass, the filter's moving down, which will remove high-end and mid-range frequencies towards the end. And yeah, let's do a piano chord, for example. This one, to get this dubby vibe, I actually filtered quite a bit. So here I did throw an extreme EQ on here. Without it, it sounded like this. To get that dubby vibe, almost like a telephone effect in context. So yeah, this was kind of the kickoff of a series of videos. I want to dive a bit more into mixing and sharing some things about sounding good. So just remember, obviously, the sample selection, especially in house, sometimes you don't need that much processing, but you, as a bassist, should have an understanding of what does it mean to sound good. And the best way to get there is to analyze existing things and stuff like this, and also really understand the elements that you're working with in your productions. So yeah, thanks for watching and looking forward to see you in the next video.